Hello and welcome once more to Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Once again with your favorite host, the one and only Cave Cat. Do you remember when I reviewed Garfield and Friends for episode 3 of this review series and Snoopy Come Home for episode 44? Well, for today's episode, I will be reviewing another animated series based off of a comic strip, but this time based off of a comic strip that was first introduced back in 1984. That comic strip would be Mother Goose and Grimm, which was created by Mike Peters and followed the adventures of the two titular characters, Mother Goose, an anthropomorphic goose, and her pet dog named Grimm, or affectionately known as Grimmy in some cases. Yeah, the strip does have some similarities with that of Garfield, being that the strip focuses on the relationship between pet and owner, just like the latter. However, one difference between the strip and Garfield is the fact that while the title character of the latter is a fat cat, the title characters of Mother Goose and Grimm, as mentioned earlier, are a goose and her dog, obviously with the former named for Mother Goose rhymes and the latter named for the brothers Grimm. In fact, when the strip was first released, it actually poked fun and made references to various nursery rhymes or fairy tales. But as the strip went on, it mostly stayed away from doing that, preferring to poke fun at various forms of pop culture, whether they were movies, TV shows, or even other comic strips. And as for the characters, Mother Goose is the long suffering yet patient and understanding caretaker to Grimm, with the latter being rather rambunctious and energetic, with his favorite hobbies being chasing cars, harassing the mailman, drinking out of the toilet, and eating garbage. We also have other recurring characters in the comic, such as Attila, the family cat who lives with Mother Goose and Grimm, Ham, an anthropomorphic pig who also lives with the main characters, Sumo, a cat who belongs to Mother Goose's sister, and several others. Then in 1991, Mark Evanier, who worked on Garfield and Friends, teamed up with Film Roman once again to produce an animated series based on Mother Goose and Grimm. And much like the Garfield specials and Garfield and Friends, it also aired on CBS for the 1991 Saturday morning lineup. However, there's one big problem with this adaptation. While this adaptation of Mother Goose and Grimm does have most of the same crew as that of Garfield and Friends, as well as the fact that it aired on CBS in an attempt to ride on the coattails of Garfield and Friends, it unfortunately was not as popular as Garfield and Friends. The reason for this is because, according to the Wikipedia page for the show, Charles Solomon of the Los Angeles Times, while praising the series for preserving the look of the strip and having a good sense of the characters' personalities, was also disappointed with the flat timing and pedestrian direction of the program. And yeah, looking back at the show, while it does retain the humor of the original strip, a lot of the jokes seem to be rather hit and miss compared to those in the strip. Yes, Mike Peters himself was the creative consultant and one of the executive producers of the show, but it still wasn't enough to merit enough ratings or popularity when competing against Garfield and Friends. So as a result, the show ended up lasting for 2 seasons. But the strange thing about this is that while the show had the proverbial 13 episodes, as expected for a whole season, they actually split the 13 episodes into 2 seasons. From what I heard, that's also similar to what Cartoon Network did with Whatever Happened to Robot Jones back in the 2002 era, before also doing the same thing to Uncle Grandpa a little over a decade later in 2013. I admit that I did watch a little bit of the show when it aired on CBS when I was younger, but I wasn't really all that interested in it because I didn't become aware that this was based on the comic strip until sometime in 1998 or 1999. However, I didn't officially get into the comic until early 2002, and I've been reading the comics since then. While the cartoon falls short of living up to the reputation of the comic that it's based on, there are actually a few good things about this show. First off, the characters are portrayed exactly as they are in the comic, with Mother Goose being the matronly and loving matriarch to her pets, though sometimes getting annoyed with them, Grimm being the wild and crazy house dog who often causes havoc, Attila being the easygoing cat who often gets sucked into Grimm's antics, and even Ham being the straight man to the craziness going on in the house. Eddie Deason, aka the voice of Mandark in Cartoon Network's Dexter's Laboratory, did a great job giving Ham that neurotic straight man vibe to his character, much like how he was portrayed in the comic, up until he disappeared from the strip sometime in 95 or 96. In fact, speaking of the voices, the voice actors did a pretty good job with what they were given, with Charlie Brill giving Grimm that excitable demeanor that you would expect from a dog like him. Mitzi McCall did a great job voicing Mother Goose, giving her that old grandmotherly vibe to her character that we've seen in the comic. There's also Attila, who was wonderfully voiced by the late Greg Burson, portraying him as nervous and prone to getting caught up in any trouble that Grimm causes. And of course, there's also Eddie Deason voicing him with the neurotic straight man vibe, as I mentioned earlier. Also, in a near similar vein to that of Garfield and Friends, the show also includes characters that did not appear in the comic, like Lassie the goldfish, who Grimm treats as his own pet, Carl the Wonder Poodle, a Lassie-like heroic dog who Grimm worships and watches on TV, Rottweiler, the dog catcher who's often pursuing Grimm and tries to catch him to no success, and Detective Fogarty, a private detective who's a little bit similar to Inspector Gadget, being that he often bumbles around on the case a lot but is not completely incompetent. He was voiced by the late Jack Burns, and I feel that he was to the show what Cactus Jake was to Garfield and Friends, being a recurring guest character who appears in some episodes. Also, like the early comics, the animated series actually does poke fun at various nursery rhymes and fairy tales, even including various nursery rhyme or fairy tale characters, ranging from Humpty Dumpty, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, The Magic Mirror, Peter Pan, Three Blind Mice, and many others. In fact, there was one episode that was a parody of the Three Little Pigs, involving Grimm having to house sit for each of Ham's siblings and trying to ward off the big bad wolf who had come to call. Another episode had Mother Goose writing her own version of Little Bo Peep, with the sheep being a gang of criminals that rob banks by coercing their victims to count them, which causes the victims to fall asleep once they do so. Despite the fact that the cartoon does its best to capture the humor of the actual comic, it still fails in trying to actually tell some compelling jokes, or at least try to tell a compelling story in each episode. I mean, some of the episode plots, like the one where Grimm meets with an extraterrestrial canine and tries to help him get back home to his own planet, or the one where Grimm inadvertently consumes a potion that causes him to turn into a Mr. Hyde-esque monster, have all been done before, but they've been done better in other shows. I could definitely see what Charles Solomon means by the cartoon having a pedestrian direction. It's because of these flaws that I will give the Mother Goose and Grimm animated series 6 stars. It's really baffling how some comic strips like Garfield, Peanuts, Heathcliff, Dennis the Menace, and even Dilbert had animated adaptations that were pretty successful, for the most part in some cases, while others like Bloom County, Marmaduke, Blondie, BC, and this comic had animated adaptations, but those adaptations just don't end up meeting the expectations of the comic strips that they're based off of. Of course, there are also strips like Beetle Bailey, Ziggy, and Kathy that have animated adaptations that do a good job capturing the style of the original comics, but don't warrant enough popularity to be featured in further animated material. And then there are comic strips like Calvin and Hobbes that will never get animated adaptations due to the creator refusing to license his work. And there's also the whole debacle regarding how Phoebe and her unicorn was slated to get its own animated series, only for that idea to fall through due to changing executives and the fact that it was met with racist and sexist treatment from Nickelodeon. If Mother Goose and Grimm would ever get another animated adaptation, aside from when Grimm made a few cameos in 2007's Garfield Gets Real, let's just hope that they'll actually do a better job with adapting the source material compared to the 1991 animated series. As I recall, there was talk of Heathcliff getting another animated adaptation sometime back in the 2010 era, but unfortunately nothing came of that. In fact, if any of you have been following my DeviantArt page, you'll remember that back in 2021, I made a meme artwork discussing my top 10 unpopular opinions, and one of my unpopular opinions with that one was how I thought that Mother Goose and Grimm should get another animated series that should fix all of the issues that the original series had. You can actually click on the link to that meme in the description down below. If Mother Goose and Grimm ever does get another animated adaptation, you better believe that I would be able to see it, provided that the cast and crew behind it would actually do a better job at doing justice for it compared to the 1991 series. But hey, potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Well, anyway, that does it for this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. If you really enjoyed the series, then be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more episodes or other videos. So until next time, see you in the future!